I just got done reading your book, The Carnivore Diet, and one, you have an epic story, and I just want to say it's amazing to and very admirable to hear you speak boldly and freely about things that aren't necessarily agreed upon by the majority of the population, and people are very closed-minded nowadays. So I appreciate you bringing so much knowledge, so much insight, and really sharing your own experience, your own authentic experience around the carnivore diet and animal-based approach. And I would really just love, first and foremost, to hear, you know, where do you think the biggest myth lies within health in our society today?
Oh my gosh. That's a that's a lot of stuff. I think that, unfortunately, over the years, we talk about maybe healthcare because, as a physician, that's what I spent so much of my life involved in. We've kind of gone away from what I think the meaning of what a physician is. A doctor is supposed to be a teacher, a healer, to where we basically are disease management technicians. I mean, that's really what we've become, and it's all in support of industry. Really, quite honestly, I mean, you think you've got some level of autonomy and independence, and you really don't. I mean, you're really just kind of enacting the dictates. Doctors are basically subcontractors for the pharmaceutical industry, in my view, and it's unfortunate. And I think a lot of physicians are truly, I mean, some of them realize it. Some of them feel like there's nothing they can do. They're kind of stuck. They go to medical school, they accrue this tremendous debt, and they've got to pay it off. And you think about it, you spend maybe up to 15 years of your life in training. For some of these specialties. I mean, you defer all that ability to even make an income, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I'm in my late 30s, and now what am I going to do? Am I going to just not you know be part of the system, which is supposed to be my reward for doing this? And so in that, we've gotten to where any sort of health benefit is almost a side effect of the system, right? The primary goal is to make money. I mean, that's clear. Even in nonprofit hospital systems, their primary goal is to make money. Profits, for-profit systems, of course, the whole entire healthcare industry is predicated on making a lot of money. I mean, in the United States, we spend between $4 and $5 trillion a year on healthcare, and most of that's to treat chronic disease, and most of that we don't do a very good job with. I mean, I mean, trauma care, some acute stuff we do pretty decent job with, but when it comes to management of chronic disease, no one talks about curing that stuff. No one talks about reversing that stuff. It's just, here's your pill, and here's your next pill, and this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, which I think is, I mean, that is really, in a way, I think as a patient, you become disempowered, because if you feel like, well, the only thing I do is go to the doctor and hopefully they'll give me the right pills, that's so disempowering. And I think, what I've discovered and what I try to preach to people is you have a lot of power in your health outcomes. And I think I mean, the things we value as representations that we think is health are things that often are tied to some sort of pharmaceutical, like cholesterol, for instance. Every time you go to the doctor, they check your cholesterol. Okay, right? Whether you want it or not, whether you need it or not. But the answer to that is, well, if we discover you've got elevated cholesterol and we keep lowering what normal is, we lower and lower and lower, so we can put you on some medication for the rest of your life. And it's just really, the system is really broken. It really, really is. And that's one of the reasons, like my company, Rivero, is our um sort of guiding principle is to do what we should be doing all along in medicine, is fixing people's health, treating the root cause of the problems, and not just medicating them chronically and sort of managing disease and putting band-aids on people. We need to fix the problems. And I think, like I said, you could talk about what individual issues there are, but that's the over, the 50,000 foot view version of that.
Yeah. What I found so interesting was when I first came across your content, I saw, Dr. Shawn Baker. I assumed that you had been in, the health and the nutrition industry or field for quite some time, but you're actually an orthopedic surgeon. And then, some crazy events that took place that ultimately led you to where you're at today, with your practice and with Rivero and everything. So how did that all transpire? So how did you go from being an orthopedic surgeon to now creating this company Rivero that's really changing the way that we do healthcare?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always had kind of a weird, as you read my story in the book, I've had a weird sort of journey throughout my life. I mean, I started out like, as a high school kid, I want to be a doctor, studying hard, go to school, graduate with honors, get into medical school. And then I got infected by playing rugby. I started playing rugby, and I ended up being pretty good at it. And I ended up getting recruited to play professionally overseas. So I dropped out of medical school. And when I came back, I still wanted to play rugby and I wasn't ready to go back to medicine. So I joined the military. And that time, this is back in the early 90s. And so I could play rugby for the military teams. And so I did. I played for the Air Force team, the All Armed Forces team, and did that until I was about 30. And then I remember I was, playing this team from Russia. And I was on the ground. Some guys kicking me in my head and my blood's coming out of my ears. I'm like, I'm too old. I'm too old for this shit. I'm done. I'm going to go back to medical school. So the Air Force sent me to medical school, back to medical school. I finished that, did my training. I did all this was in a civilian hospital in Texas. And, I did all my training, became a surgeon, did my time in the military, went over to, of course, Afghanistan and did a bunch of trauma surgery for a while there. And then finished out, joined a practice, became the head of the practice. I was, because I was the senior guy in the practice, recruited a bunch of surgeons, was a very prolific surgeon. I was doing a lot of surgeries. I was promoted by the hospital. I was on billboards and radio shows and, all the stuff and had a good career. And then I made the mistake of, well, one thing I started to see my own health start to, get compromised a little bit. Even though I was an athlete still training, I was starting to get out of shape. I mean, metabolically, I wasn't feeling good. So I started changing my diet. And then as I started to feel better, I said, this would be kind of cool if I did this to my patients because I see patients all the time. They're overweight, they're obese, they're tired, they're sick, they got aches and pains. And so I started, just counseling patients on a little bit of lifestyle stuff. And then I started to see some really amazing things. I saw people that they came to me because they needed their knee replaced. They had horrible knee pain and bad x-rays. And I say, well, we needed you to lose a little weight for surgery. And I put them on a diet. And they come back and they say, you know what, doc, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. And I was like, huh, well, that's weird because I got you on a schedule for surgery. But if it doesn't hurt, we don't need to do it. And then I kept seeing that over and over again. So then I said, there's something to this. I'm pretty excited about this because by that time I had done thousands of surgery, and surgery wasn't a big deal to me. I mean, it does it's like making toast. You just do the same thing over and over again. I know not to minimize the importance of it, but once you do something 1,000 times or 2,000 or 3,000 times, it's not as exciting, right? Well, it's exciting if you're the one getting under surgery, but for the surgeon, and you want a surgeon that's like, yeah, this is routine stuff, right? But that's where I was. But I was more excited actually about not operating on people because I thought it was really cool. And that sort of doesn't. And I was kind of naive at the time. I thought the hospital would be really thrilled about this. I said, hey guys, guess what? We can avoid all these surgeries. And that I quickly learned that that's not that's not the right answer. They want to do surgeries. They want to do procedures because they make a lot of money that way. And so I ended up going with, I went through a long, protracted legal battle with the hospital because I wanted to do lifestyle stuff, and they didn't. They basically attacked me through peer review. I ended up getting my license suspended for a period of time, which I got back immediately. But it was just a really nasty thing. It really left me jaded about the healthcare system, and by that time, because this whole process took a couple of years, and so in that time, I started looking at nutrition more and started just seeing. And then I can't remember at what point. I think it was about a year later. I got into the crazy carnivore stuff, and then I just got more. I ended up because I started seeing so many people improve their health, not just like their knee got better. I mean, like everything. I mean, their whole quality of life changed just 360. I mean, we had people that were absolutely miserable that now we're back to like, I'm happy. I got a normal life. I feel good. And to me, that was really powerful. It made me really excited as a physician because this is what I thought I signed up for in the first place. And what I realized, what I didn't sign up for, and what I found out I was doing is I'm just a technician, just changing the oil. I mean, basically, I mean, it's just like I was a highly skilled, oil change guy or something. You could, whatever the analogy you want to use. And so when I started like really truly healing people, you know, that made me more excited. So that's why I've been doing what I've been doing now for the last, gosh, almost going on a decade now, and I've been very very happy. I'm way happier now as I am than I was as a surgeon. I was a pretty happy surgeon, but I'm I cannot tell you how much more rewarding it is for me personally, to just be able to see the tremendous changes we've seen. And like I said, this is something that needs to happen. I think for the health of the society. I mean, we're spiraling down. I mean, and if you can see it, every generation gets worse and worse when it comes to chronic disease, health, obesity, mental health. I mean, we're just seeing it just go down the toilet, and I don't want to see that. So that's what keeps me motivated, because I got kids. I got a bunch of young kids, and I want them to have a world where they're have a chance to be happy and physically, feeling good. So anyway, that's kind of the overview.
So what were some of the things that you were giving your patients in terms of lifestyle changes? You mentioned giving your patients lifestyle changes. They'd come back to you. Oh, doc, my knee's good. I don't need surgery anymore. Like, that's incredible. What were some of the things that you were giving them?
Well, I mean, we were just cutting out the garbage out of their diet. I mean, we were often going on what would be called a ketogenic diet at times. It was basically very low carb, eating a lot of steak and eggs type stuff. This is before I discovered the carnivore thing. This is just, I was kind of doing kind of more of a ketogenic low carb stuff. And not now, clearly not every patient would do that. And in fact, most of them would, but the ones that would, that actually did, I mean, the results to me were just shocking as an orthopedic surgeon, because I never thought about like nutrition impacting arthritis. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're too heavy, yeah, there's too much weight on the joint. That's what we're taught as an orthopedic surgeon. If you're too heavy, then you're going to have more mechanical force and more pressure across the joint. But then you start thinking about, well, why do people's fingers hurt? You know, why do people's fingers hurt when they have arthritis? Because they're not walking on their fingers, right? They're not. Their hand isn't like super big. Or why does their neck hurt? It's not like their head got super big. But so you start to realize that it's actually a biological phenomenon more so than it's a mechanical problem. And I think the literature is starting to catch up to that. And that's what I clearly see, is that it's just, you change their biology, and nutrition has such an important impact on that. And so that's, again, that's what initially inspired me.
You're a pioneer in the space, right? Like, you kind of coined the carnivore diet. You
Yeah.
you were the one who really popularized that, and you're
Yeah. I
even
mean, like I said, this diet has been around for a long time. I didn't invent eating only meat. I mean, that goes back to, like, I mean, it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. You can look at, James Salisbury the 1800s. You can look at, guys like, the Scottish surgeon, I'm blanking on his name now. But anyway, it's been described forever, right? They've used all meat diets to treat diabetes back in the 1700s. Um, there was a group of people that were calling themselves zero carb. We don't eat carbs. We're zero carb. And I was, I got somehow interested in them, started observing them. I thought they were nuts. I thought they're crazy, right? Like everybody else does. And they, but they were putting up results that were pretty compelling to me. And I was open minded enough. I had already gone through the low carbish sort of transition where I kind of, at least felt I kind of sort of distant. I kind of got over the, low fat is it the right thing type of thing to do, or at least was questioning that. And so yeah, it was a zero carb diet. I tried it myself, and very publicly back on, at the time it was Twitter in 2016. And, I had a few thousand followers, not to the extent that I have now, but, and somehow, somehow Joe Rogan saw that and invited me on his show. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't really realize how popular he was at the time. And he's obviously more popular even now. And so then that obviously got a lot of eyes on what I was doing. And then a book publisher contacted me and said, hey, you're on this crazy all meat diet. Can you write a book about it? And I was like, yeah, okay, I can write a book. I had no desire to write a book. I don't even like writing. I mean, it's funny because I mean, most people, I think a lot of people have read it, have enjoyed it, and like the way the writing style, because I wrote it for like, I wrote the book for like to be as approachable as to as many people as possible. I didn't want it to be too technically difficult that would bore people, but at the same time, I wanted to get the information out there and kind of convey that there is some, scientific rationale behind this. But anyway, the title of the book we didn't know, and I said, well, I'm just going to call it the Carnivore Diet, and that's the genesis of the Carnivore Diet. And now there's been a lot of people that have written books about that, and carnivore is now very popular. But before that, no one called it carnivore. I'm the first guy to call it carnivore. Like I said, I didn't invent eating only meat. That that goes back to some freaking Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon or, you know, Homo erectus has invented that diet. But I mean, as far as calling it the carnivore diet, yeah, that's me who's coined that term.
Was there anybody, any resources, anything at all that was really like your introduction into this? Because you are the introduction for a lot of people today, but was there anybody for you who
Yeah,
introduced you to this
yeah,
way?
yeah. So, I mean, if you go back to the early part of the 20th century, 1900s, there was a Arctic explorer. His name was Vilmar Stefansson, and and he wrote books, and there's accounts of him living in the Arctic Circle with the Inuit, and describing the fact that, hey, I just eat meat. I only ate meat for like 12 years, basically, in total. You know, and he would make those claims. This is back in the 1920s, and everybody thought he was nuts, right? And he said, no, you can just eat meat and be fine. They're like, no, no, no. These people from Harvard and all these other, no, you can't do that. So very famously in 1928, in Bellevue Hospital in New York, he put himself in a metabolic ward, and they observed him, around the clock. And he did this study for a year, and he just ate meat, and he was like, fine. He was like, look, I'm totally fine. And so they wrote about 6 academic papers back in the 1920s about this. So that was the kind of the early, I guess, modern genesis to this. And then there was a guy named the Bear, Stanley Owsley. It was kind of funny. He was like an LSD manufacturer who used to work, and he used to supply the Grateful Dead. I don't know if you remember that band,
Oh yeah.
the Grateful Dead, with
Yeah.
LSD, right? But he was on a carnivore diet, and he had done it for some like 50 something
Wow.
years. And then, there's been a couple other physicians over the years who've kind of talked about that. And then where I kind of got some of the information was there was this group of people on Facebook, kind of crazy and weird as it sounds, called Zeroing In on Health, and it was a zero carb. It was kind of their little, way to describe that. And there was a few thousand members that were just talking about, hey, I'm no longer diabetic. I'm no longer got this disease. I feel better. And that was my initial introduction to that. And they're still going on, and there's some good people. And, like I said, and that's honestly what shaped my view was largely taken from what their experience was, because I'm like, why reinvent the wheel? Because, then you start getting all these doctors and other people involved, and they're like, oh, but you got to do this and you got to do this. And I'm like, man, these people already figured it out, dude. Just, there's nothing that beats experience. Right. And you can, like, then you can science it and then you jack it up. That's what we often do. We try to put the human, like nature figures things out, right? Over periods of, millennia, and so when we go in there like, oh, we can do a better job, and then you get some weird stuff that happens. And so, yeah, that's the genesis of the carnivore diet from my perspective.
And it's right around that time, right? 1920-ish, where the Flexner report came out and they started demonizing, like, a lot of things that have been in culture for, hundreds of years. And these people were paid off. I believe they were like um, Harvard scientists or researchers or whatever it was, and they came up with these false reports. And then, kind of as you progress into, what is it, the 60s and 70s, where fat, like saturated fat and red meat, and there's like the demonization of all of this stuff. Red meat gives you cancer, eggs are going to kill you, saturated fat is horrible, right? Like, why did that come about? Like, how did that come about? And then when did that kind of resurgence come into play of like, no, red meat's actually the most nutrient dense food on the planet, and this is what we should be predominantly eating in terms of our diet?
Yeah, really, I think some of the origins really have to do with religion. I mean, this is what we see if we look back into, what our diet was like, in the United States and other parts. It was very much animal based in many ways. We eat a lot of meat. You're eating what was available to at the time. I mean, if you lived in, Minnesota in 1850, man, you ain't got a lot of stuff to choose from, right? There's not a grocery store. They can't ship in bananas from, but Mexico or whatever. So you were kind of limited, and we clearly ate a lot of animal products and butter, and butter was the main fat, or animal fat, tallow and lard and those types of things. And so that had been the diet for, really millennia in human terms. And I mean, obviously you would eat whatever plant stuff that you could easily acquire that was seasonal. But then there was a gal named Ellen G. White who was I guess the sort of the one of the genesis of something called the Seventh Day Adventist Church, and she started having these weird she like dropped on her head and started having these epileptic sort of weird visions. And she started claiming that God was speaking to her and telling her that there was one particular passage in the Bible that talks about, having fruits and seeds and herbs. I can't remember the exact biblical passage, but so she focused on that and concluded that man was meant to be basically vegetarian. And that was sort of her doctrine. And that was picked up later by guys like the Kellogg's brothers, John Harvey Kellogg, who, was sort of a disciple of hers and an early member of the Seventh day Adventist church up in Battle Creek, Michigan. And he, developed Kellogg's cereal as an attempt to, calm our lust, and prevent people from masturbating and thinking about sex and all that stuff. And he was actually mutilating people's genitals as well. He was a really weird, sicko guy. But that, but then in 1917, members of this same, religion, the Seventh Day Adventists, went on to found the American Dietetics Association in hopes of sort of convincing people that vegetarianism was the way. So since the beginning of time, the beginning of modern scientific history and nutrition science, which, in the United States was largely what's been exported around the world, started out with this sort of religious zeal, this anti-meat vegetarianism. And so that's where it started. And then, of course, you've had these people that have, I mean, they've occupied some of the highest, positions in nutrition since its beginning. So you have that inherent bias within there. And then, through the 1950s, Dwight Eisenhower has a heart attack and heart disease is on the rise. And so they're looking for a reason. Oh, we got to find a reason. Everybody's freaking out. A lot of people are having heart attacks. And so, Ansel Keys comes along and says, hey, it's dietary, saturated fat and cholesterol is causing all this. And clearly it's related. And we've got this study that shows that countries that eat more saturated fat have more heart disease. And that's it. Aha. And we've discovered it. And that wasn't really settled science. But a lot of people had questions about that. John Yudkin out of the UK was saying, wait a minute, no, I think it's more like it's processed sugar and things like that. And he said, no, I'm right, you're wrong. They paid off, the sugar industry paid off Harvard to publish data that said that fat is bad and sugar's fine. And, and then all of a sudden, as we get more into this industrial age of food, we get all this processed food, which is enormously profitable. They know that if and we're seeing that even greater today, that if we can make this really like basic agricultural waste products, I mean, that's what cereal more or less was. It was like this stuff we're going to throw away. Let's throw some vitamins and put some sugar on it and sell it to these unwitting knuckleheads and they'll eat it for breakfast. And so we've had that. And so right now, I mean, it's really been like this effort to get us to eat more and more processed food because it's so much more profitable. Right. And right now, in terms today, like, your generation, I mean, you're eating 70% of your calories come from processed food, ultra processed food, which is just poisoning you. I mean, it's killing everybody. But there's still going on with it because it makes profit. It's all about profit. The USDA just came out. I talked about this on Rogan. We're going to design a study that's 91% processed food, and it's quote unquote healthy because they want you to believe that it's healthy. And every time you get meat out of your diet or animal foods out of your diet, rather, and we see that the more plant based you go, the more likely you are to consume ultra processed foods. Studies clearly confirm that. And so, I mean, that's really what it is. It's just to, you know, they don't care if you're sick. I mean, if you're sick, well, if you're sick, guess what? Then the pharmaceutical industry makes more money, right? So and the companies that own the people that own the processed food companies also own the pharmaceutical companies. You're talking about BlackRock, you're talking about Vanguard, you're talking about Capital Assets Group and Stateside or State Street, whatever. They own so much of this stuff, and they own all the other companies. So they're just trying to drive their own profits for the shareholders. That's really what's going on, And meat is kind of inconvenient because when you eat a lot of meat, you're like I eat these steaks. I got no desire to eat, cookies and processed garbage. I'm like, good. I'm like, fine. And they know that, and they don't want that. So if they get meat off the menu, everybody's going to be eating all processed food, and they've got doctors out there that are pushing processed food. Oh yeah, processed food's great, you know. It's kind of it's almost it's nefarious and pretty much kind of evil in my view.
Yeah, it's so interesting too because you see baby food, and, like, the foods that we feed our kids, and a lot of them you look at the back of baby food in the grocery store, and the first food
Yeah.
or the first ingredient is, like, sugar or high fructose
Yeah,
corn
it's like
syrup.
yeah, it's corn syrup and corn or soybean oil, and it's like they're like infant formula. It's I mean, gosh, I mean, can you imagine you feed that to an infant? First thing out of its mouth, first thing in his mouth is this horrible, horrible Stuff, yeah, it's sad, and then then they, from day one,
And then
I
it's
mean,
green
sometimes a
mush,
year.
right? And then it's like mushed peas that they give you once they get a
Yeah,
little
well,
older.
it's just it's crazy what we're doing to our kids, and you're seeing that because now how many kids are on mental health drugs? I mean, it's enormous numbers. How many of them are obese? We got like a 22% childhood obesity rate. When I was a kid, there was the one fat kid in the entire school. Now it's like, every second or third desk there's some, morbidly obese kid or, or obese kid in there. It's really, really a shame.
Yeah, I'm interested. What did lunches look like back like when you were going to school and like, elementary school, middle school, or were you predominantly packing your lunch back then?
When I was a kid, yeah, we brought a lunch. We brought our own lunches. I mean, it was kind of a rusty, smelly old lunchbox, like a brown banana and maybe a sandwich. And, it was kind of like maybe some carrot sticks and maybe a few pieces of fruit and maybe even a package of potato chips. But that was kind of my lunch as a kid growing up. But yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, in high school, we had like a hot lunch program and I can't, I think they had people, they say they still had some junky stuff, but it's not near as bad as it is now. I mean, gosh, it's awful now.
Hmm. What do you think would be ideal or optimal for a mom or a dad that's, bringing their kids up, after they get off of obviously like breastfeeding is like super important, and it's sad to hear about how many women are not breastfeeding and giving them, these formulas. And obviously there are certain health complications and whatnot. And I'm not a woman, so I don't want to press judgment on anybody there. But also
Neither am
like
I.
right, exactly. So, as they progress, as children progress into like the toddler years, into the early development years where, you know, I was this way, like I was eating Lucky Charms and, bagels and, toaster strudels and all the things because my parents they
Right.
didn't really know any better. What can, you know, let's look at like
Well,
the world as
I
a
can
whole.
tell
Like
you,
what can we do?
I can tell you what we know from, comparative physiology and things like that. So, a young child needs a lot of energy, right? I mean, they need a lot of energy. They're growing. They need building blocks in their growth, and so they have a really high demand for energy. And if you look at comparative uh, mammalian studies where they look at weaning times, like how long does an animal breastfeed, and how big is its brain, and how do they get there? So, human beings have a relatively short, like compared to other primates. And so, if we compare a human to say a chimpanzee or orangutan or something like that, humans have huge brains, right? We have very big brains, and we have a very short breastfeeding time, right? We have a very short. I mean, on average, in the wild, we're not talking about modern women, but like a women on an indigenous tribe, female would usually breastfeed for about 2.5 years, which is much longer than we do now because breast milk is extraordinarily energy dense and nutritious, obviously. But to acquire the size of brain that we have as a human compared to say a chimpanzee or an orangutan will breastfeed for 8 years and they still have a tiny brain, right? Their brains are smaller. So the only way they've looked at them, they've calculated the energy requirements for brain growth relative to breastfeeding weaning times, and they've looked at that in the wild. The only way you could do that to grow the human brain would be by having a very energy dense diet consistent with a highly carnivorous diet. And so um, that's probably what would happen in the wild in order for us to sort of develop correctly. And but today, like we talked about, when we take ultra processed food, modern food, like you can take starches now and turn them into powder, and so they have much more energy per volume of food than they would in their native form. And so you can kind of get the surrogate to get the energy you might need. However, you're going to be missing out some of the critical nutrients that you would get, on a more of an animal based thing. Because you get with the animal based thing, you not only you get the energy that you need, but you also get all those particular fat soluble vitamins and other products that are in animal food that is optimal for brain growth, whether it's carnosine, carnitine, taurine, the EPA, the DEHAs, and things like that. Whereas, what we do now is, yeah, we get these kids enough energy and their brain grows reasonably, but they're not growing to the point where they're probably optimal. And then, of course, they're having all kinds of these metabolic consequences where, a lot of kids are becoming, particularly they get obese and their brain is probably not as developed as it could be. And so then they have a lot of issues with emotion and, concentration and cognitive growth. So now you have, 1 out of 4 kids taking some sort of mental health drug in your classroom, and that's just unprecedented. Never before was that the case.
Have you worked with any younger kids, teenage kids, with
Yeah, I
your
mean, a
Vero?
few. Yeah, a few. I mean, to be honest, most of the people I see tend to be older folks because those are the people where they really they're really hurting because, that's 30, 40 years of crappy diet. It really takes its toll on you. But I have had some kids in there. I've had some kids with, like, 20-year-old, 18-year-old kids with Crohn's disease. We've seen some people with autism, ADHD, and things like that, where diet does have an impact on those things. So yeah, we've seen younger folks for sure. And I wish the message was out there that, I mean, particularly, if you get something as you get some sort of illness as a younger person, that's the perfect time to treat it with nutrition because you can reverse it and it won't be lifelong. Whereas if you wait, and you go to the doctor and they say, "Oh, let's put you on this pill and that pill," and it never really treats the underlying cause. So your diseases continue to get worse, but you're just, trying to manage the symptoms. And so the disease progresses. And so by the time you're like 40 years old and you're pissed off about the healthcare system because you feel like they screwed you over, then you're like, okay, well, I finally discovered nutrition. And now I've dug myself such a hole that I may not be able to get all the way out of that. I can improve my quality of life, but I may not be able to achieve what I could have if I had just not gotten sick in the first place or nipped it in the bud, back when I was 20, right?
So I know you've got some kids, right? So growing up,
Yeah.
what was chow time looking like in the Baker household for the kids?
Well, like I said, I haven't always been on a carnivore diet. So I've got 4 kids between 11 and 17. And we've always consumed, a decent amount of meat. Now it's like nowadays, it's definitely, it's like lots of steak, eggs, sometimes some seafood, a little bit of dairy products. We rarely eat any vegetables, if any. My kids don't want them. I don't want them. I don't buy them for them. Sometimes I have a little bit of fruit, but I mean, that's largely what, maybe a little bit of cheese or something like that. But that's largely what the household looks like every day. Like when I have dinner every night, or when I do have dinner, it's usually a bunch of steaks or hamburger or something, and there might be a couple pieces of cheese sliced up, and my spouse will sometimes slice up an apple, and she'll munch on that with the rest of it. But that's it's like meat, cheese, and fruit typically is what's on the dinner menu, and I'm usually the one just eating the meat. But anyway, that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, what was really interesting to hear about the way that you approach nutrition too is you really just eat when you're hungry and you don't eat when you're not. And you're able to set all these powerlifting records and the world rowing record for your age group and do all these incredible athletic feats. Whereas, I took a nutrition coaching certification and it was talking about, how the eating a bunch of carbs beforehand and then carbs after and just, basically being in the running industry too, like in the running space, they talk about, "Oh, yeah, what's the best pre-run fuel?" It's like pretzels, white bread, graham crackers, goldfish. I'm like, "Wait, what?" And then you have someone like you who's set all these incredible athletic feats, you don't have any bloating or inflammation, and you're still thriving, right? So why like, basically, how does somebody, like, hear both sides of the spectrum and after hearing that, like, they're confused, right? It's hard for them to make a decision. So,
Sure,
how do
sure.
they go about doing that for themselves?
Well, I mean, first of all, I tell people not to trust anybody, to verify it yourself. I mean, you try the things, see what works for you. But I mean, from my perspective, you look at, like, humans are part of the animal kingdom, and there's no other animal that's out there with an app and a calculator, like, figuring out what they got to eat. I mean, and they perform pretty well athletically. I mean, obviously we're not lions or zebras or anything like that, but I mean, honestly, I mean, you know, why would I? What is the point of me being hungry because I want to eat something? And that's the whole purpose that hunger serves, or what it should serve. And you're supposed to get the right nutrition. If you get the right nutrition, then you should not be very hungry. Very for you know for if you consume enough food of the right type, then your hunger is taken care of until the next thing. Whereas a lot of people, when they try to time it, like, I'm only going to eat 12 grams of this here and 75 grams here, and time it with a clock, then it's like it's not really in accordance with your own physiology. And I get it, like, you're looking at ultra level athletes that are, taking all kinds of drugs, and they're trying to optimize for the absolute best performance. And, maybe that's a little bit of a different topic. I would argue you could do very well on a very low carb to no carb approach as well. I mean, there's data that certainly supports that. But for the average person, gosh, I mean, nutrition should not be challenging. I mean, it's like, and for most of humanity, it hasn't been. I mean, some of it's a lot of people have starved because there wasn't adequate nutrition. But I mean, like any other animal in the world, it doesn't need that stuff. It just here's what I'm supposed to eat, and I eat it. And I eat when do I eat? When I'm hungry. When I don't eat when I'm not hungry. And what do I drink? I drink water. And it works pretty well for other mammals, right? And we're all ultimately mammals and animals, and they do. I would argue that you see some pretty athletic and impressive things done within the animal kingdom that we belong to without all the. I don't know. Could you take a? Do you think you could take a cheetah and you on your own feed him or her and make it run faster? I mean, I wonder if anybody thinks they could design a cheetah diet and exercise program that would beat what they already do on their own. And I'm not sure. Maybe they could, but I'm not sure. It'd be interesting. It would be an interesting experiment. You might get, he might get annoyed and he might bite you or something like that. But who knows?
Who knows? There's a lot of talk about what's the optimal amount of protein each day. You got to eat, 1 gram per pound of body weight on a given day, right? But then, I know for you, you might eat like 6 pounds of steak and then not eat again for like 36 hours or so, right? So, what is your take and your opinion on kind of daily intake versus just like long term and not looking at it on like this 24-hour clock or this 24-hour cycle?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I like to eat when I'm hungry, and when the food tastes better, that's for sure. And I generally, over a period of time, you kind of get an impression of what you need. I mean, it's just like, I mean, I generally just, I pretty much eat the same thing every day, so it's kind of like I know how much generally I need to consume to feel satisfied and get me through the day and do what I need to do. Now, if I have a particularly strenuous day where I'm going to train super hard, then I may consciously say I'm going to eat a little bit more or something, or maybe eat afterwards to get a little more nutrition in me. But yeah, generally uh, I mean, I think satiety occurs when you give yourself the right amount of nutrition, and I think there's certainly protein plays in there, but energy plays in there as well, and that's where fat comes from, and obviously the nutrients that are contained within the meat. Also, you need a certain level, and that's as simple as it is. I mean, in practical terms, what does it look like for me? I'm 6'5". I'm 255, maybe 260 right now. And I mean, I consume 3.5 pounds of meat a day. That seems to be and that keeps me at baseline. Now, if I wanted to get a little leaner, guess what? I'd eat a little bit less. If I want to put a little more muscle, guess what? I'd eat a little bit more. I mean, calories still have a role here. But at the same time, so does satiety and hormones and all those other things that impact, how the calories are utilized, I suppose.
Have you looked into at all the debates of, meat is the number one cause of climate change and it's ruining our environment? You
Yeah.
get that a lot from the plant-based side
Yeah.
of
Well, I mean,
things.
that's the data doesn't support that assertion. Yeah. Does does the production of animal products have an impact on the environment? Of course it does. Everything does, right? But is that impact, does it overshadow its benefit? And I would argue clearly it doesn't. One of the things I like to talk about is, well, we'll say that a pound of meat causes this much greenhouse gas, whereas a pound of beans only causes this much greenhouse gas, or not even a pound, but calories. They'll say like, you know, 500 calories of this is meat and 500 calories of beans is this. But but when you start looking at it was like, what are those calories made out of? Because one of the most environmentally friendly things to raise when it comes to just calories per greenhouse gas equivalent is sugar. So, I mean, if we wanted to take that, we could say, well, we just everybody eat sugar, right? And we would have really low carbon footprint if everybody just ate sugar. But what would happen to everybody? Well, everybody would be so we already got so many people who eat sugar. So when you start looking at what about critical nutrients? What about things like essential amino acids? And then all of a sudden, when you start comparing those things, they start to get closer and closer and closer. And so it's just a goalpost to decide to use. They're like, well, because it uses, per calorie, it does this. But it's like, well, it's not about calories. It's about nutrition, right? That's why we eat. If we just wanted calories, like I said, we just eat sugar. The other thing is that, like for instance, in the United States where I live, and I think where you live, right? Um, Beef greenhouse gas emissions are 2% of our total country's emissions. So 2%, is 2% worth it to feed our country the highest quality food possible? I think it is. And let's look at some other things. The hospital system, the healthcare system, is anywhere between 4 and 10%, depending on which study you look at. So when I put people on beef-based diets, I mean, they're no longer diabetic, they no longer have their Crohn's disease, their hypertension goes away, their metabolic syndrome goes away, their obesity goes away. They no longer need the hospital system, which is producing 10% of our greenhouse gases. And so you have to look at all the effects. You can't just say, oh, well, beef is this and we're going to cut it out. What would happen is if you cut out beef out of everybody's diet, the greenhouse gases would go somewhere else. They would go to other foods, transportation, increased hospital usage. And so the net effect would probably be actually the opposite, right? So you have to think, you just can't look at, one thing in isolation. You have to say, what's going to be the overall effect here? And yes, you could cut out greenhouse gas emissions from cows, but guess what? They would come somewhere else. They would come from somewhere else. And you would have, in my view, and I think there's very good evidence to show this, a much more unhealthy population. And I think, the biggest threat to climate change, if you want to think anything is, and I know a lot of people think it's all hocus pocus and mumbo jumbo, but it's a bunch of sick people. I mean, this is the greatest threat to the world, is a bunch of sick, unhealthy, mentally deranged people, because, mental health ties very closely to physical health. And nutrition plays a role in both of those things. So, I mean, you got a malnourished population of people that are either chronically sick, they're crazy, they're depressed, they're lazy, they're stupid. That's a real problem.
And, I saw a crazy stat that it's like a third of all food that's manufactured in the world, might even be closer to like 50% at this point, goes to waste. When
Yeah, it's like
I
40.
feel like
I think,
it's
well,
like
yeah, 40% was what I saw. It's 40% of it food waste. And so
that,
it's like, and most of that is fruits and vegetables and baked goods, by the way. I mean,
right.
that's where most of the waste occurs. There's a little bit in the animal agricultural sector, but it's very little compared to this other stuff. And so that's another huge issue, and I have almost zero food waste, because I mean, I
You're not
put
leaving
steaks
any
out.
steak
Yeah,
behind. You're not
there's
throwing
nothing left
anything
behind, and
out.
no one in my family does. And if there's for some reason we can't eat it, the dog will eat it. I mean, it's like in my household, there's as close to zero waste as possible. I create a lot less trash. I spend a lot less energy cooking things. I spend a lot less on dishes. I spend a lot less trips to the grocery store. I mean, on and on and on. So it's actually quite economical in the grand scheme of things. It's actually quite minimally impactful on pollution and garbage and those types of things. So I mean, it's when you just isolate, like I said, one variable, you're missing the whole boat.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't think people look at it that way. I certainly didn't for a long time. Is you don't look into the other factors that actually go into it, right? And how many times are you throwing away, things in the cabinet or fruit
Yeah.
or
Yeah, how many
vegetables,
bags of
especially.
organic spinach have you thrown away? I mean, it's just like, or whatever, rotten bananas or moldy strawberries or whatever. I mean, you buy all that organic stuff and it's like, shit, man. 3 days later, you're throwing it out. And
Exactly. You get some steaks and
yeah,
some ground beef from the farmer's market. You're not going to eat them right away. You throw them in the freezer. They're all good. They'll
right,
last
right.
forever.
Yeah, yeah. I've had steaks I've eaten that have been a year and a half old and they're still fine, man. Yeah.
So, what is your opinion on grass-fed, grass-finished beef versus grain-fed beef? And I know, in my personal opinion, I think that it's a great way to like just get people eating red meat first. Like, don't really focus on like the quality. Like, first, not saying don't focus on the quality, because obviously, like regenerative farming, we're talking about the economy or the climate change, and regenerative agriculture is doing amazing things for the climate. In my opinion, I think it's great to get people on a red meat diet, get them eating that, and then focus on then you get to the grass fed, the grass finished beef. But working with your clients and your own experience, have you seen a major difference between eating like grain fed beef versus grass fed, grass finished beef?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is no, there's not much difference I see on the clinical side. Now, I mean, if you want to talk about consider why you might want to preference one or the other, obviously cost is a consideration for many people. Many people, it's like, man, that's what I can afford. And I'm always like, yeah, that's still better than the frosted flakes and the Twinkies and the other crap. So eat what you can afford. The outcome studies, and there's not many that have been done, don't really show much of a difference in humans so far. There's some people doing some work showing, there are some nutritional differences for sure between something that might be pastured or grazed and regenerative, if you want to call it that, versus say something that's raised in a feedlot. But clinically, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. And so that's what I say. Look, whatever you prefer and enjoy, and you're going to be able to stick to for whatever reason. Now, are there advantages to a regeneratively raised animal? And by the way, grass finish doesn't necessarily mean it's better for the environment. It depends on how it's done. I mean, a lot of grass finishing is what the guy named Greg Judy likes to call the Columbus method. You just put your cows in the field in May and you don't get them till October. And then they just wander around eating whatever the hell they want, and they actually damage the ground. And so, but if you're intentionally sort of intensely grazing them, where you put them in a particular sector and you move them every day, then you're going to have an outcome. But most grass finished beef isn't done that way. Most of it's just roaming around and they do whatever the hell they want. And they produce more methane, by the way. Grass finished animals produce more methane than grain finished animals. Most people don't know that, but that's actually the truth. Not that I'm like methane is the whole thing. Grass finished animals, particularly regeneratively raised animals, yes, they put more soil in the ground. They actually sequester carbon. Will Harris and others have done studies that have shown that. So, if your sort of goal is to maximize climate benefit from agriculture, then yes, please support regeneratively, pastured animals that are managed appropriately. If that's not your main goal, and I got to tell you, most people when they go to the store to decide what they're going to eat, they're like, what does it taste like and how much does it cost? That is pretty much how 99% of the people make their decisions. And so if you're just saying, look, ground beef is cheap and it tastes pretty good, I can afford that. That's at least where you get them to start. Like you said, it's important to get them started somewhere. And almost all of those people are going to have a great outcome anyway. But like I said, in the long term, if we're going to, quote unquote, save the planet, I'm not sure the planet needs saving, I mean, but if we were to decide that was going to be our priority, then yes, supporting, maybe even legislatively supporting, subsidizing that style of farming instead of just subsidizing all the corn and soybean crops that we do now, would have an impact. But like I said, anybody is like says you got to do grass finished, regeneratively raised animals to have success on the carnivore diet. It's not true. I mean, I'm the guy that knows because I'm the one that's actually studied. I got data on 12,000 people doing the diet, and it didn't make a difference. The Harvard study that asked the exact same question found no difference in outcomes, and so that's the reality. Now I know there's people that love to tell you these stories, and I'm there to support the ranchers, and I probably more than just about anybody I've supported all these, whether it's the Will Harrises or the Joel Salatins or the Greg Judys or the Gabe Browns. I've had all those guys. I've talked to all those guys, I'm very thankful and glad to promote what they do. But the people will tell you that the only way you can do carnivore is to only eat this type of meat is it's just dead wrong. It's not the truth. And I think by doing that, well, it's like the people that were like saying, well, you got to eat a bunch of organs. If you're not eating like three baboon penises and 4 zebra testicles a week, you're going to be malnourished. That's also bullshit. You can just eat steak and eggs and you're totally fine. I mean, that's this whole like Liver King nonsense that got a lot of clicks and views. That's all nonsense. You don't need to do that stuff. I can tell you for sure. And a lot of those people that do that, they end up getting sick and they can't do it anyway. And then they're off on to doing something else. Now they're on the fruit and honey brigade. So it's like I said, those things are unnecessary and they're basically there for clicks and maybe to sell some supplements. Honestly. And so that's one of those things that kind of frustrates me a little bit about what I've seen. But anyway, it is what it is.
So let's say, for example, somebody's hearing what you're talking about today. It's resonating with them. They want to make a change in their diet. Would you recommend that they just, quit everything that they're doing and try to go cold turkey, say, "Oh, I'm never eating processed sugars again"? Or how do you go about kind of weaning people off of these highly processed diets into a more animal-based carnivore approach to diet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the person. If someone is like older and sicker and on a lot of medications, in that situation, I think it makes sense to sort of dial it down slowly and actually get some supervision. That's one of the reasons our company Rivero is designed to help people with that because there can be some negative things that can happen. Your blood pressure can drop precipitously, your blood glucose can drop dramatically, and you can end up with serious bad outcomes with that. So if you're like relatively young and healthy, medications and you want to just go cold turkey, yeah, you can do that. I talk about in my book, different strategies. It's like taking a band-aid off. When mom takes off your band-aid, it's like, pour a little water on it and pull it off really slowly. And when dad goes in there, he goes, suck it up, kid. And so it's like one of the, what are you the one that wants to do the dad rip off the band-aids, or do you want the mom to kind of go there and slowly pull it off? And which one's better or worse? I don't know. It depends on the person. But I mean, everybody's going to have some level of transitional issues, maybe, mostly. Sometimes they're pretty severe, and it's often with the rip the band-aid off thing. Some people that are like food addicts, man, it's like, they got to go cold turkey or they're going to keep backsliding. And so it's one of those things. And we know that about 14% of the population is addicted to food. And if you're one of those people, it's a real issue. And, it's like I talk to all these people that are, I mean, I talk to people that are 5, 6, 700, 800 pounds. And I'm like, how the hell can you get to 800 pounds? Right? It's food addiction. Yeah, that's the only thing that can potentially make that. And so those people, it's tough. It's a tough issue, and they got to go cold turkey. And when they do that, surprisingly, they'll say, "Hey, look, this is the first time in my life I can finally find the off switch." It's just like it's like taking a heroin addict and saying, "Hey, you can shoot up once a week." That's never going to work. We all know it's not going to work. So the same thing, you got to do that with some people to have them kind of go cold turkey.
Well, it's amazing to have people like you who are leading the charge and being really pioneers and catalysts in the space, and not being afraid to speak your mind and providing these resources and really just changing people's lives. So, with that, what excites you the most about what you're doing with Rivero, about the future of health? What really just excites you about the work that you're doing moving forward?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Rivera. I mean, that's where my passion is, and I really hope that we can change the healthcare system. I don't think we can change it from within. I think it is just too, inextricably, tied to the pharmaceutical industry. Not that all drugs are bad, but I mean, it's gotten to be ridiculous at this point. And so I think there's going to be just a whole groundswell of people that are like sick of that stuff. I mean, there's doctors that are tired of it. A lot of patients are tired of it, and I think there's a huge need for this. And I think we're positioned pretty well, and we have, I think, what works really well for people going forward. And so, that's really what excites me more than anything right now. And of course, seeing this movement grow, seeing more people, you know, figure this out. It's becoming, I'll give the example. I was on Rogan a couple days ago. When I went on his show 6 years ago, and I talked about me just eating a bunch of meat in the carnivore diet. It wasn't even called the carnivore diet back then. It was before I even named it the carnivore diet. He looked at me like I was a friggin' nut job. I thought I had like got an eyeball in the middle of my forehead. He was like, "What the hell?" I came over this time and he was gushing about how good carnivore is. I mean, he was like, "Man, every single human I've ever talked to that's been on it's gotten better." So we're seeing a dramatic shift and turn in the perception of what this thing can do for you. And I really like to look at it as, let's just consider it a therapeutic protocol. We don't have to make it a lifestyle, or say all humans are carnivore. I mean, that's kind of silly. I think, let's use it as a therapeutic, intervention. Let's get people healthy, get them off drugs, and then, then they can kind of figure out what they prefer, but get them unaddicted from this garbage. We got to get people off all this processed garbage, which is killing everybody, and we all know it. And in 1954, 45% of Americans smoked. That was a peak of cigarette smoke in the United States. That number is now down to about 13%. And the reason that occurred was because, as a society, as a country, we decided that, hey, smoking is not good, and we're not gonna make it illegal, but we're gonna we're gonna educate people, and we need to do the same thing with this ultra processed garbage. I mean, that's what has to happen, and I think we're starting to see more and more people get it. Certainly at the ground level, the grassroots level, but I think even some of the people that have some level of political influence are starting to also say, "Hey, look, we got to do something," right? So I think that's what excites me, that people are starting to kind of finally get this stuff.
And it's just amazing that, social media and, one conversation that you have with two human beings, you and Joe Rogan, that is going to positively impact the lives of, so many people. So, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's very much needed. It's very much appreciated. And as someone, I'm 24 years old, and I really look at the next generation. I'm like, how do we set that next generation up for success and really, take care of our health? And I look at guys like you who are really leading the way. So one, I just want to say I appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Don, for having me, and I encourage you to, yeah, the younger folks got to, because at some point I'm going to be irrelevant. I'm going to get old and be irrelevant, and the next generations have to fight this. Otherwise, you all are going to be, eating bugs and soybean slop, and living in friggin' a prison planet basically. So you got to fight back.
I'll start stocking up my my deep freezers now for that, so we don't ever have to deal with that. But Dr. Baker, I appreciate you. My last question for you is one I ask all my guests. It's the Pure Ambition podcast. So when you hear those two words together, pure ambition, what do they mean to you, and how do they apply to your daily life?
Goodness, pure ambition. Well, I mean, I think that obviously pure indicates something that is very focused, without all the distraction, I suppose. And ambition is just what you want to do, and it can be negative, it can be bad. Being ambitious can be considered a bad thing, but I think at the same time, uh, you know, like I said, I'm shooting for the moon, or whatever. I'm trying to go as high as we possibly can, and I think that's where the ambition comes in. And wherever you get out, if you don't push hard, then you're never going to get anywhere. You might not get to your goal, but I mean, at least you're going to get further along than where you started. And I think it makes sense to, like I said, my goal is to completely revolutionize the healthcare system, and that's a very ambitious goal. And I'm very pure minded about how I want to do that. I think we shouldn't compromise, and I think we should, persevere. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I saw Elon Musk, who I'm sure everybody knows who he is, basically telling his advertisers, "F you." I don't want you. You cannot threaten me with money. I think freedom of speech is so incredibly important that I'm willing to risk a lot, and perhaps at all, to defend that. And I think that we need more people that'll do that. And so, anyway, those are some of my thoughts on that.
I love it. Incredible. If people want to check out your book, they want to check out more of the work that you're doing, follow you, where are you hanging out at?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, Rivero.com is our healthcare company. If somebody in your audience needs a doctor, that we're licensed in all 50 states, so Rivero.com. My book is The Carnivore Diet by Shawn Baker, MD. It's kind of funny. Some guy has a picture of me on the cover, and it's not. I didn't write the book. It's just like they use my image, and it's kind of. Probably I should say something, but it's just. But anyway, it's got a picture. Well, you got a picture. It's got a
I
picture
got
of
it.
steak.
I got it right here. This
Yeah,
nice, big, nice,
yeah, that's what my
delicious,
book looks
juicy
like. Don't
steak
get
right there.
don't get the fake one with my picture of me in a hat. That's the wrong one. This is
No,
a
this is it right here.
um, yeah. And then there's of course, I'm on social media. Instagram, I'm on at Shawn Baker. So it's ShawnBaker, and then 1967, which is the year I was born, sadly. And then on Twitter, or no, sorry, X, it's now called X, S Baker MD. I've got a YouTube channel, Shawn Baker MD, and I'm also on TikTok at Shawn Baker MD. And so those are the main places you can find me.
Love it, man. I'll have all that linked in the show notes for anybody who wants to go and check that out. Support Dr. Shawn. He is crushing it. Man, thank you so much again for all the work that you're doing. Appreciate your time today. I know you got busy guy, lots to do. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Appreciate it. All right, man. Have a good one. Take care, man.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I wanted to give you all a heads up too that I launched a free community on the Upspace app where you can join, ask me questions, connect with like-minded individuals, follow my 4-week running and strength training program that has some dedicated mobility sessions in there as well, so that we can all optimize our health and fitness together. So if you're interested, head over to the App Store, download the Upspace app, and join the Pure Ambition community today. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.